Mac Power Users, episode 497, Spotlight, Alfred and LaunchBar. Hello, everyone. This is David Sparks, along with my pal, Stephen Hackett. How you doing, Stephen?
Hey, David. How are you?
Excellent. Today, we've got a show plan that we've been thinking about for some time. These keyboard launchers, we both use them, but you're a big Alfred user. I'm a big LaunchBar user. There's always Spotlight getting better in the background. I thought it was time that on the show, we kind of went through those big three players and talked deeply about keyboard launchers on your Mac.
This is a big topic, and it's one that, like I said, we've been working on for a while. We made each other use the opposite person's launcher for like a week and a half, which totally just broke me. Like, I'm so used to Alfred.
I want to hear about that because there are big differences. But before we do, we got a couple preliminary announcements. First, a reminder about the newsletter, getting lots of nice feedback on that newsletter. So if you'd like to get a newsletter in your box every day when MPU publishes with the show notes and the links and maybe a couple other little bits and nuggets. One of the things I've been doing with the last couple is I'll put a little teaser about next week so you get a hint about what's coming. Mm-hmm. We're going to have some more fun with it. We haven't figured it all out yet. But if you're interested, there's a link in the show notes here to sign up for that newsletter.
This, of course, is the month of August, Relay FM membership month. You can learn more at relay.fm/membership. We sell ads on the shows, and that's the bulk of the income that David and I make on this, but the membership really is a huge part of it as well. And so if you are a member, thank you so much for your support over the years. If you're not a member and you're curious about it, it comes with a bunch of perks. You get access to a monthly behind-the-scenes newsletter and a monthly podcast that I host with various other Relay hosts, so people who don't normally work together, I drag them together and we talk about something. And then in the month of August and September, bonus episodes of every single show come out. And so for MPU, David and I drafted Apple hardware. So our favorite Macs or most important Macs, other Apple hardware. It was a lot of fun. I think you would really enjoy it. So you can learn more at relay.fm/membership, or if you want to support this show, you can go to relay.fm/MPU, and there's an option to select your level of membership. Thank you so much for your support of Mac Power Users.
I've had a couple people ask me about Keyboard Maestro. They just came out with version 9. I will be updating the Keyboard Maestro Field Guide. It will be a free update. I'm just neck deep right now in finishing the automators. The new I'm neck deep in finishing the new series shortcuts video, and that's going to keep me busy for another couple weeks. But once that's done, I'm going to dig in on the Keyboard Maestro Field Guide, and I have ordered a Stream Deck, so I'm going to have lots to say about some of those fun new features in Keyboard Maestro Field Guide. So just hang in there.
Yeah, the Stream Deck looks super cool. So it's basically a box with a bunch of light-up buttons on it, and then you can tie those now to Keyboard Maestro actions as triggers. So I imagine, because you're going to have eventually like 6 of these, and like everything you do on your computer is just all done with just like a single button.
I just bought the big one, man. I bought the 32 button one. I just jumped straight to the end. I mean, if I'm going to put something on my desk, it might as well have all the buttons.
Sure.
The idea that it has a cord coming out the back was a real problem for me, but I've decided where I'm going to put it underneath my iMac, because I have it on a stand. I mean, not on a stand, but on an arm. So I can put it right in front of the arm and I can reach it there, and then I won't see the cord. But yeah, I mean, like one of the things I was just thinking about when I ordered it is like all my setups, because I have all these setups where I can jump to podcast mode or jump to lawyer mode. I can put some of those on buttons. I don't know. We'll see.
That's going to be cool. I'm looking forward to hearing more about how you like that, because I've eyeballed that for a while, but really just because it lights up and looks cool. So if you turn it into like a big part of your workflow, I'm really interested to hear about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you can tie that to anything you do in Keyboard Maestro, it suddenly becomes a lot more useful. But
oh yeah,
so I'm going to cover that in the update to the field guide, but that's coming. So just give me a little time. But shortcuts is got its boot on my neck right now, and of course, Apple, as we record this, Apple still has not put the automations back in. So I'm doing all sorts of tricks to get around. I've got a bunch of them in my spreadsheet here that just say beta blocked. I can't do anything.
Yeah, it's a rough beta cycle this time around.
Yeah, but hopefully soon.
So we're going to talk about keyboard launchers or app launchers, or there's kind of a great. There's not a great name for this category,
but they are great. They are great tools, though. I mean,
absolutely. I mean, it for me, and we're going to get into this and how we use these. Like Alfred, a laptop or a desktop Mac without Alfred feels a little bit broken to me because I'm so used to customizing and doing things.
Yeah,
and it's been a part of the sort of macOS 10 experience for a long time. Like I'm sure a lot of people remember Quicksilver, which is actually still around, but it really had its heyday like years and years ago as sort of the first major like third-party app launcher, keyboard launcher type deal. But Apple's in the game too with Spotlight, and we're gonna talk about that, sort of set the stage with Spotlight, and then talk about these alternatives.
The very first screencasts I ever made were Quicksilver screencasts.
Whoa. Oh, man.
I love that app so much. At one point, I had done some crazy nonsense in the terminal and disabled Finder, and I ran my whole Mac off Quicksilver.
Wow.
It was just to prove a point, I guess. Do you remember the Quicksilver Cube interface?
Yeah, it would like rotate around as you walk through steps in an action.
Yes, I loved it so much. Yeah. Nobody has done that. Man, I would love that so much if they did that. Yeah. Anyway. That was a great app.
It was a great app. Man, you just got me all sad that it's fallen from grace.
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by SaneBox. You want to talk about automation, gang, you need to apply automation to your inbox. And you can do that with SaneBox. SaneBox learns what email is important to you and filters out what isn't, saving you hours. The way that works is you've got your inbox, but you've also got your Sane Later folder, or you can create other ones if you want. For instance, I have one called Sane Feedback. And SaneBox will look at everything as it comes into your inbox. Now, it's not creepy. They're just looking at the subject line and the sender. They're not looking at the body. And then they sort that for you. So the stuff that's not as important can get put into a different box. It allows you to stay sane. Before I started using SaneBox years ago, I would wake up in the morning and I would just dread opening my email because I'd get in there, there'd be like 80 messages or something. And I know for some of you, that's like you're laughing. Like 80, you got 300, I know. But I'd have all these messages and it was just too much for me to process. And most of them were junk and a few of them weren't. And you had to like sort through all the junk to get to the good stuff. Well, with SaneBox, I wake up and I've got, somewhere between 5 and 10 emails in my box, and they're all the important ones. And all the other junk is sorted out into other boxes that I may or may not go through later. So it's just great to have somebody. It's like having your own little email assistant figure out what's good and bad and sorting them out for you. And the fact is, it works. They do such a good job. They pay attention to how fast you respond to email, and they know, the ones that are more important to you. It works with all kinds of email programs and services. So if you're like me and you're jumping around on iOS between different mail apps, you get those SaneBox features to follow you wherever you want. And one of the things I really like is it gives me things in Apple Mail that Apple Mail doesn't have, like the ability to put into a later box. They have Sane Later, which gives you deferred email, the same black hole. They got this great snooze feature where you can defer events until the next business day or the weekend. Sane Reminders is crazy. So when you send an email, if I send an email to Steven and I blind copy it to 1week@sanebox.com and Steven doesn't reply to me in a week, it gives me a reminder, tells me, hey, you sent that thing to Steven, he didn't reply. That allows me to avoid trying to track that stuff in OmniFocus or some other task manager. They've got various plans starting as low as $4 a month, and there's a 14-day free trial. By the way, MPU listeners, they all sign up for this. Everybody that tries it ends up signing up for it because it's just so obvious how useful it is. But head over to sanebox.com/MPU and receive a $25 credit on any plan. And I'll tell you, that's the best discount they give. I told them, we want the best for the listeners, and they gave it to us, $25 off. MPU listeners love it. You'll love it. Go try it, sanebox.com/MPU.
All right, so let's start with Spotlight. It rolled out as part of like macOS 10 Tiger way back as a way to quickly search your Mac, and that was really the sort of the early days, searching files on your Mac. Of course, it sort of became an app launcher because really applications are kind of files according to the Finder, so you could back in the day hit Command Space or hit the little magnifying glass in the menu bar. I start typing mail, and the email program would pop up. But over time, Apple's made it a lot more powerful. They've sort of freed it from the menu bar, and now it has its own UI floating in the center of the screen that you can access with the shortcut. And they've added additional like search realms, if you will, to it. So it was just local files, and they added file searching for network drives and external drives. But these days it can do a lot more. And it's sort of, I think Spotlight has sort of learned from the third-party options where you can do things like search a dictionary, do simple math, which I do this all the time in Alfred. I need to subtract one number from another, and I just do it really quickly just there, and then I can paste out my results. You can look up movie show times, check the weather. So it's a lot more than just file searching, more than just app launching these days.
So if you just type weather, it gives you the weather in a really nicely formatted box. They have added a bunch to it. I mean, the thing about Spotlight, when it first started, it was kind of horrible. I mean, it was like slow and inconsistent. But over the years, they really have added a lot of the kind of things that people would normally want. Stephen talked about quick calculations, but like currency conversion, I think got added in the last one, which is pretty nice. If you just go in there and type like $10, it just immediately gives you the conversion to euros, pounds, Japanese yen, Canadian dollars, and Swiss francs. So they've done a good job with it. But what they haven't done is gone the extra like steps with it. It's solid. It does the things it does well, but it's just not quite a power user thing yet. I mean, somebody asked me when I told them I've been, working with Alfred, they said, well, why do you use any of that stuff anymore? Don't you just use Spotlight for everything? And what Spotlight does is good, and it's getting better. Although I'll note that in Catalina, there was no mention of Spotlight, and I don't think they've done much on Spotlight with Catalina. But there's just so much more. As we get through the show, you're going to hear why I really believe, I don't care whether you go for LaunchBar or Alfred, I think you should really try one of these if you're not using them, because they go so much further.
Yeah. Spotlight is customizable, though. So while it does lack some of the features we're going to talk about, you can control what it does pretty well. It has its own system preference pane, and it has kind of two sections. So you can enable or disable different types of search results. So say, that you want to exclude maybe all PDFs or all music files for some reason. You can go in there and simply uncheck the box, and it will leave those results out of your, out of the system, if you will. It won't search those anymore. But you can also set folders or even drives as private, which prevents Spotlight from searching these locations. So basically what you do is you can drag in a folder or a disk from Finder. So I have this set up actually in Spotlight because Alfred uses the Spotlight database, but I have a folder that is generated. It's in Dropbox, and basically it is a copy of all the show notes of every show ever published to Relay FM, and it's updated anytime someone posts a new episode. It's actually based on like the iOS app that Relay FM has. But there's it's just text file, so it's really small, but there's tons of noise in there in my search results. And so I found that folder in Dropbox, I drug it into this privacy tab, and now Spotlight and Alfred won't look at that folder in my results. And so if you have something that is sort of muddying the waters in your Spotlight results, or something that, maybe is a little bit private and it's on your computer and that's fine, but you don't want it easily accessible, you can add this to this privacy list. And I think that's a pretty nice feature. That feature's been there a long time, but one I think that a lot of people will probably overlook.
I think a good example of the difference between Spotlight and some of the apps that we're going to talk about is a contact card. For instance, if I type Hackett in Spotlight, I'm going to get Steven's contact information. It's displayed very nicely. But let's say I need to give Steven's email to Mike. Mm-hmm. If I'm going to do that, I search Steven in Spotlight. I see him. But the only thing I can do to get his email address with Spotlight is I have to take the mouse and very carefully align it over the first letter of his email address, and then click and drag to to select it, then hit Command C, and then I can go paste it. If I don't get it right, if I miss the first letter, I got to try again. But there's just no easy way without taking my hands off the keyboard and using a very precise mouse movement to get his email address. Where if I'm in Alfred or LaunchBar and I type Hackett, within one or two keystrokes, I can have his email highlighted and set to the paste buffer. It's just that kind of difference. And it sounds silly, but when you're sending email addresses out once every couple days, it really weighs on you that you can't do it faster.
That's a good point. And that's something that I definitely use all the time, is looking at contact information. One thing that Spotlight does have, though, that these others don't, is because it's made by Apple, it is better integrated into some of the other like data repositories on the Mac. So for instance, Notes, the Apple Notes application, you can search for content and titles and notes via Spotlight. But something like Alfred, which I use, you have to have basically like a workflow to tell and allow Alfred to like look at that notes database. So Spotlight generally gets kept up with other macOS features, but sometimes there's other apps, maybe it takes a little while, or maybe you have to do something custom or on your own for it to see those different data sources. So if you're all in like the Apple ecosystem, if you're not using any of these, Spotlight's, I guess, a good place to start because it has those benefits. But I think to your point, when you are running up against the limitations of Spotlight or you want to do more, then there are a lot of good options to look elsewhere.
Yeah, and I guess another kind of introductory point to all of this is none of this is mutually exclusive. So Spotlight by default runs by hitting Command space on your keyboard. And I've never changed it. All these years I've been using LaunchBar, it's just been Option space for me. Because you can, with these other third-party apps, you can tell them, what is my triggering key? It doesn't have to be Command space. So for the longest time, I've been running Command space for Spotlight, Option space for LaunchBar. Now I've got Command space for Spotlight, Option space for Alfred, and Control space for LaunchBar. I've got all three, baby. And since I bought licenses for them, so why not? I'm going to use them all. But but you can kind of pick and choose. Like if you want to do something that Spotlight is better at, like I feel like currency conversion, Spotlight wins. I mean, I tried. I installed an Alfred workflow. We'll talk about those later, which is kind of wonky. The getting to work in LaunchBar isn't that great. In Spotlight, you literally type in a currency and it automatically converts it for you. It's just so easy. Mm-hmm. So there are things that it's better at. I agree. But I also feel like if you're limiting yourself to Spotlight, there's a lot of stuff you could do faster on your Mac without realizing it.
Yeah, and I think the speed of doing things is really what attracts me to this type of application. That there are things I do on my Mac that I can do with 3 or 4 keystrokes, basically instantly, that if I were to use the cursor and like go around to all these other applications and make it work, it would definitely take longer, which is the beauty of automation, right? It's the heart of all of this stuff. But if you have something that you are, wanting to speed up on your Mac, very often these types of applications can do it. They started life as app launchers and file searchers, but they've come so much more. Like we said, even Apple's own Spotlight has really moved beyond what it was initially.
Yeah, I talked to somebody from the Spotlight team this year at WWDC, and I raised that issue. I said, you guys do so much, but I feel like you don't make the data accessible very often without taking your hand off the keyboard. And I talked about like the phone number as a good example. Mm-hmm. Like so often I need to get a phone number, or when I'm, doing something, I need to get an address off a client card. And there's just no way to do it in Spotlight without lots of very precise mouse movements, and who wants to do that?
It really slows you down.
And it's potential of error, because sometimes I do it and I paste it and I realize I missed the first letter, and then it's like you got to go back and figure it out.
Which is critical in an email address, it turns out.
Yeah, apparently the email, if you leave the first letter off, it doesn't work. I don't know why that is.
So strange.
Same thing with phone numbers. If you leave the first phone number off, it just doesn't work.
It's real precise, it turns out.
Yeah.
So I think that's a pretty good look at Spotlight. We'll have some stuff in the show notes, kind of walking through its other features over on Apple's website. There is a neat trick in Spotlight, though, that I wanted to make sure we covered before we moved on. And this is true it's sort of inherited from search within Finder. that you can use Spotlight to search for specific types of files. So for instance, if I just typed MPU, I get results that are images, folders, bookmarks, mail messages, events, etc. But if I say, kind, image, and then MPU, then I just get images that contain, MPU in their name. So now I just see some pings, a Photoshop file, and a JPEG, and it is hidden the rest of those things. So you can use Spotlight to drill down to certain file types. And this is really useful, I think, if you have a lot of files that are, maybe for a client or a project, so that they're all named sort of similar things, and you just want to see the PDFs or just the keynotes. You can go do that in Finder search with that token system, or you can just do it from the keyboard with Spotlight. I'm not sure when they added this, but it's something that can really narrow down your search results really quickly.
No, that's been there for some time, and that is a feature that very few people use.
The other cool trick is if you are in a search, in Spotlight, you're in a search, and you want to go to the location of that file, you just basically have that result selected, and you hit Command R, and it opens a Finder window right to that image. Very often, if you're in Spotlight, you're doing a search and you want the file, but then you realize, I actually need to email that file to somebody. Well, some of those other tools make that easier. Spotlight doesn't, but you can bail out to Finder with Command R and then perform your action on that file from that starting point. And I think that's also a helpful deal if you not want to open a file, because Spotlight's really built around opening files, opening applications. But if you want to do something else with it, this is like a shortcut to get to Finder to get where you need to go.
I think I guess the point is Spotlight isn't like a dumpster fire. It kind of was in the old Tiger days. I felt like I would run a Spotlight search, and it felt like it was like manually, like there was somebody at Apple that was looking through my file system and then reporting back or something. I don't know what was going on, but it's much faster now, and it's much more powerful. But I still would argue that these other apps are worth the investment in time.
Me too. I think all we're saying is Spotlight is a great place to start if you haven't done any of this before, but you can do a lot more if you're willing to invest in something else.
Yeah, and the nice thing with Spotlight is it's on every Mac. So if you're away from your Mac, you can still get a lot done with your Spotlight chops on a computer that you don't control. Like I sit at my wife's computer to do some maintenance or something, I have to use Spotlight. I can get by fine.
Yeah.
But I just, with Alfred or LaunchBar, I can get so much more done.
Well, I'd say that it's time to talk about those. This episode of Mac Power Users is brought to you by Text Expander from our friends over at Smile. We're talking this episode about making the Mac more productive, and for me, Text Expander is a huge part of that conversation because it lets me easily insert text snippets into any application from a central library. And that library of content is created by me, but you can also share it with team members. So at Relay FM, we have a shared Text Expander snippet group that contains sponsor names. Because, some of our sponsors capitalize their company names in funny ways, or their products. Like the word Text Expander actually has a capital letter in the middle of it. And we pay attention to detail. We want to get that right in our communication. And so we, 3 or 4 people, have access to that. And as new sponsors come on, we add the correct spelling and capitalization. And then we make the trigger like a really common misspelling of it. So for instance, Text Expander, I think the snippet has the capital E, but the trigger has a lowercase e. So if we typo it, it corrects automatically. And it's all shared across a team, so we know we're all doing it correctly and all doing it the same, which is important to me. And Text Expander works everywhere that you type. So it's not just in Mail or in Word or Pages, but it's in places like iMessage and Slack. And anywhere you can use text on the Mac, you can use Text Expander. So no matter what app you use, you can have that consistent, productive workflow. Text Expander is available for macOS, but also Windows, iPhone and iPad, as well as Chrome. And over on the Text Expander blog, they have a bunch of posts about interesting ways to use Text Expander. I was just reading through one about using it to promote like a speaker, or if you're presenting somewhere, you can kind of load up some text expander snippets with the time and the topic and share that really easily. It was a really creative use of text expander in ways that you may not have considered. So go check that out.
I still think the winner for text expander is a couple weeks ago, Tom Zoller writes comic books with it. That's crazy.
It really is. It's a way more creative use than me making dates and stuff all nice and neat. But that's why he does comic books and I don't, I guess.
Yeah, I guess.
Show listeners will get 20% off their first year of Text Expander by visiting textexpander.com/podcast to learn more about Text Expander. And again, you'll get 20% off by visiting textexpander.com/podcast.
All right. So the big two we're going to talk about today are Alfred and LaunchBar. And I'm going to spoil the ending. I think they're both great apps. And I don't think either one is the one you must get, but I think either one is the one you must try, if that makes sense.
I agree. They're both really good. Their feature sets overlap very heavily, but they do things differently, and they are designed differently. So it may be that they both meet your needs, but one sort of fits the way you think better, which I think is the case
exactly
for me with Alfred. I sort of work the way it works a little bit more than LaunchBar.
I think they both are opinionated in the way they work, and they're different, which is super interesting to me. And so I guess why don't we do just a little summary of each one in terms of how it works, and then we can get into the individual features.
Yeah, so I'll start with Alfred. It, on the surface of it, is just like Spotlight, right? So you're searching files, local files, network files. You can search the web really easily. Spotlight does that too. We failed to mention that Spotlight will fall back to web results if it doesn't know what you're trying to do. And Alfred has a feature that LaunchBar has as well, where it will learn what you mean. So again, like in my example today of searching the letters MPU, that's a bunch of files on my system. But if I always pick the same folder or the same Photoshop document, after a few times, it will learn what I mean, what I want when I type MPU, and it will bubble that to the top, which again is like designed to save time. Alfred is much more than that, though. A lot of that, those additional features, which we'll get into, expand Alfred out from there, and it has an extensive workflow platform, really, where you can write your own workflows or import those made by the community to further extend it. And we'll get into how some of those work. But it is a app launcher and a file searcher, but it's really extensible and smart in the way that it works past that.
Yeah. I mean, one of the fundamental difference in my head is just the input engine. So they both work the same. You trigger a command, and just like Spotlight, it opens a box on your screen that you type into. Sadly, none of them involve rotating cubes, but I guess I'll just have to let that go. But either way, there's a box you type into, but they look at this very differently. With Alfred, it's an editable box. You type in it, you can backspace, you can fix what you're typing. With LaunchBar, it's just you type and it gets a result. There's no like fixing anything, but it has a timer where it resets the typing. It's kind of hard to explain it. I think in some ways the LaunchBar one might be faster if you know what you're doing, but if you change your mind halfway through, it'll make you crazy because you just type, and I bet that's probably one of the reasons why you had trouble with LaunchBar.
That's exactly why I had trouble with LaunchBar.
Yeah. So if you go in the settings for LaunchBar, you can set that reset timer, how long before you reset. But I've always used LaunchBar. I mean, the thing with LaunchBar is it was there first, and I was super into the idea of a keyboard control from the very beginning. As I've said before, I was using Quicksilver. In fact, the Quicksilver author wrote an article where he said that Quicksilver was really broken. I think he got a job at Google. He didn't have time to work on it. He was using LaunchBar. And that's the day I bought a LaunchBar license,
Yeah.
So I've just been using it. So I just know it. It's under my fingers, if that makes sense. And switching over to Alfred for me was a bit of a learning curve too, because it's just kind of a different, I mean, I've worked in it before. I've always tried to keep up with the different apps, but I hadn't really used it as my only thing for a week and a half until you and I agreed to do this. And, it is a little different, but I kind of like the way Alfred does it too. In some ways, Alfred, I think, is more forgiving.
I think so. I think you're right about LaunchBar really being opinionated in the way that it is faster, but it wants you to be more accurate with your input and not change thoughts midstream. And Alfred is pretty forgiving. You hit the delete key and go back, and it'll just restart from where it is, which is really handy for someone like me, where sometimes I'm a couple keystrokes into an Alfred search, and then I think, what am I actually looking for? And so I just sit there and think for a second, and then that reset timer would get me in LaunchBar without adjusting that setting.
Yeah, in terms of look, I think they're both pretty. I mean, as much as you can make a box that you type text into pretty, they are. Mm-hmm. Alfred was the first to this game. I remember I was jealous of Alfred for a while because I was so into LaunchBar. When LaunchBar, I first used it, it was just a box that dropped down from the top of the screen. It was not a free-floating window. And 2 or 3 releases ago, I think it was version 5 maybe, they added, the thing just like every other keyboard launcher where it's a box now that floats in the center. You can replace it if you want. Mm-hmm. You have dark themes, light themes, whatever. So they're both pretty. They're the same in that regard, I think.
Yeah, I think so. They both look like Mac apps. They're not some sort of weird foreign invader into your macOS workspace. They feel and work like Mac apps, which is great. And they're both menu bar apps. They both have settings where you can turn off their icons. Like I don't have the Alfred icon anywhere. It's not my dock. It's not in my menu bar. It runs in quote headless mode, launches at login. So there are occasions where my computer is logging in. I try to hit it really fast, and macOS hasn't launched it in the background yet. But you're not stuck looking at an icon in your dock all day just because you want to use something other than Spotlight, which is really nice. I appreciate apps that give you that customization.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about these apps as application launchers.
Okay,
why don't you go first with Alfred? I mean, how does it launch applications?
So for me, I'm hitting the command space and I can start typing an application name. So I can start typing Safari. Because I do this often and it's learning, I get Safari at the top of the window, and Alfred has a neat trick where I can actually launch a couple different ways. So I can use the cursor keys. Say Safari for some reason was the third item down. I could use my arrow keys down and select it, and then if I hit return, it would open. But it also has shortcuts to the side, Command 1, Command 2, Command 3 going down. So if Safari were number 3, I could then hit Command 3, and Safari would open for me automatically, just with a keyboard shortcut. Again, you're talking about Spotlight, how you've got to move to the mouse. Alfred really doesn't want you to do that. It wants to keep your hands on the keyboard. And so I use that all the time. And the apps that I commonly launch with Alfred, of course, I do all the time, so it's learned it. So for instance, Mars Edit is a blogging Mac app that I use to publish to 512 pixels. I don't keep Mars Edit in my dock. I launch it from Alfred. And so by the time I hit command space MA, Mars Edit is the top thing. And Mail, which is in my dock, I don't launch it from Alfred very often, is number 3. And so if I wanted to launch Mail, I could hit command 3 and be on my way. So the ordering adjusts depending on what you do over the course of running the app. But if you have apps that you launch with it all the time, you can do it in just 2 or 3 keystrokes and hit return, and you're good to go.
Yeah, and one of the things I liked about Alfred is when you do, like I just type in Alfred NUM, and numbers is number 1, of course, because I use numbers. But below that is a list of the most recent numbers documents I have opened. And it's right in the initial search screen, if that makes sense. Like you type num, and I can arrow down 2 or 3 and open the most recent numbers document. So I don't have to just go to the numbers. Usually I want to go to the most recent document I've used in it. In LaunchBar, it's done a little different. When you type numbers, it shows you apps. It doesn't show you recent documents, but if you hit the space bar after you type it, it gives you a nice listing of just recent documents. So Alfred kind of mixes them, but they're in the initial search screen. It doesn't require that extra tap. So they both kind of do it in an interesting way. You can also, with Alfred, for me, the app stuff is all about the recent documents. You can right arrow, and then it gives you a whole bunch of options to do with it. You can move, you can do all sorts of stuff, but it also has a recent documents button. Doesn't show as many as LaunchBar does. I mean, I know these are like little subtle things, but I think just kind of breaking it down kind of gives you an idea. One thing I never figured out with with Alfred is like when you right arrow after you've selected an application or a document, with LaunchBar, you can left arrow to go back out, in essence, kind of go back in the menu and do something else or pick a different document. With Alfred, it seems to be a one-way street. If you start right arrowing, it just goes right. It doesn't go left. You can't like go back to the initial search. You've just got to start over again. But I mean, what they both do better than Spotlight, frankly, is give you keyboard access to your most recent documents, which that for application launchers on document-based applications, that is golden. I mean, like, and by the way, Microsoft Word doesn't work with either one of them because Microsoft doesn't participate in whatever OS, I wanted to say Mac OS 10, but was it Mac OS now?
Yeah.
Microsoft doesn't really participate with the Mac OS recent document donation API. They, of course, wrote their own, which doesn't work with any third-party stuff. So you've got to go open Word and tap the recent documents button in Word. But for everything else, it's great. And that's one of the ways I love these apps. I mean, as silly as it is, I do that multiple times a day, and I love being able to just hit, PAG for pages and open the contract I was working on the other day with just a couple taps.
Yeah, it's just a matter of, again, sort of how you think about things and how you want to do things. If you're file-centric, one may work better, but Alfred has this neat deal to like move through folder navigation. So it's sort of how you think about the way things are laid out. If you're a user like me where you have things in folders and subfolders, that may influence your choice for one over the other, as opposed to if you just have like documents folder and you have 4,000 things just at the root level of documents. So it can be interesting to see those differences play out in these applications that on the surface seem very similar.
Can I jump to the address book thing? Because I think address book is a big deal for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
And that's another one. I'll go first with LaunchBar. Address book works the same way the app launcher does. Like I can type Hackett, and then I can hit spacebar. And so I see Stephen Hackett, I hit spacebar. It gives me a list of all my details on Stephen Hackett. And I can arrow down to his email address, hit Command-C, and then I can just, jump into whatever app I'm using and paste it. I don't have to take my hands off the keyboard. Another thing it does cool is it allows you to, I can hit return on Stephen's email address, and it opens up a new email in Apple Mail, the compose sheet written to Stephen from me, where I can go in and just work on it. In fact, if I hit another space, I can type the body of the message and then hit return. And then it creates the email, inserts the body, and puts the cursor on the subject line. So I just type a subject line and hit enter and send it off. And this is a huge win for productivity, because one of the holes that everybody gets caught in is like, I need to send an email to Stephen. I open Apple Mail or whatever my mail app of choice is. What's going to happen? You're going to see your inbox.
You're going to see your inbox, yeah.
Yeah. You completely skip the inbox with this. I know Alfred does it something similar, right?
Yeah, it's a little bit different. So out of the box, how it works, if I select you and I have your email highlighted, if I hit enter, it would open a mail message with your, composed to you with the cursor and the subject thing. So that's not in the Alfred interface. That's happening in Mail. But it has a couple other things. You can, if I have you up and I have your email selected, I can copy it, or Alfred has a feature called large type. If I hit Command L, it basically dims the screen, and in white text with a black background gives me your email address really big. I use this sometimes if I need to make a phone call for somebody. I would just make their phone number enormous and then dial it on my phone, as opposed to dealing with the contacts app on my phone. It's also helpful for addresses. If you're labeling an address, you can just have the text of their address really big and write the address label. There are some workflows that mimic what LaunchBar does. I've had really mixed luck with them working in Alfred. Part of that may be that at the time of our recording, Alfred was just revised from version 3 to version 4. And it seems like some workflows, third-party workflows like done by the community, need to be updated to fully take advantage. So I don't know if that's like a temporary issue or if that workflow just doesn't work. So I'm not going to link that one because it doesn't actually work. So it's a little bit different than LaunchBar. But for me, I'm not a as regimented about my email use as you are. Mail's basically always open, so it's not a big deal for me the way that it works. But
I just got a shiver. Sorry.
but either way, definitely better than like dealing with the mouse in a Spotlight result window.
Yeah, a really cool trick I figured out with Alfred in my last week and a half that LaunchBar doesn't really do. I can just open up Alfred and say email Hackett and then return, and it starts an email to you. It just opens up the compose sheet in Apple Mail with an email address to you. And that's even better in some ways. It's less fiddly. I just type email Hackett and then it opens it up. And I am a big fan of the idea of getting emails written without looking at the inbox. It does. I know myself, I guess I'll say. But both of them, like the other thing is like I often have a need to copy an address and just like Steven said with the big text thing, that's super useful. I use that as well. LaunchBar does that too.
Let's talk a little bit about how these apps integrate with the internet and with browsers. So both have bookmark search. I use this all the time. I'm a pretty big bookmark user, actually, just because of Alfred. So the way I have mine set up, I have the keyword being BB. So like Alfred doesn't put bookmark search results in line with the rest of things. So like, for instance, I have a folder called MPU Outlines. And if I just type MPU Outlines, it doesn't find it. You have to give it the keyword to say, hey, I'm searching my bookmark. So mine is BB. And I can start typing MPU, and I get MPU Show Outlines, MPU Schedule, MPU Sponsors. And these are all bookmarks within Safari. And if you use Chrome, you can tell Alfred in its settings, hey, look at Chrome instead of Safari for my bookmarks. I do this, I don't know how many times a day. I have 4 podcasts and I have a bunch of other stuff I work on. And a lot of that stuff is bookmarks to Google Docs or web apps or something. And so if I sit down and it's time to work on the liftoff outline, Command space BB LIF, and the first item is liftoff notes, which is, again, a bookmark, not a file. And it's going to open that right in Safari for me. And I'm curious, if you're a big bookmark person, and if you are you using LaunchBar to get to those pages quickly?
Yes, and yes. I mean, LaunchBar just finds them. You just type in the name of a bookmark, it finds it for you.
Yeah. I wish Alfred had it sort of baked in and not being behind a keyword, but it's a bit of a bummer.
And that's one of the things that vexed me with Alfred this week is I was having trouble accessing bookmarks, and I felt like it was probably operator error. And now that you've explained it, I'm going to have to go after the show and figure it out to make it work better for me, because I do like searching bookmarks, recent history, all that stuff is really useful. And I know both of these apps access it, but I feel like for LaunchBar at least, it was easier for me to get to it. Mm-hmm. A couple of the cool things LaunchBar does with the internet that I missed that Alfred didn't have. In LaunchBar, if you just type dot, it just puts a the period. If you go, it creates a URL. And it highlights if you type .apple, it'll go to www.apple.com. And I couldn't find any similar feature in Alfred. Although if I did type www. something, then it realized, he's doing a URL, and it would fix that for me.
Right.
But Alfred was just a little faster at it. I don't know. I mean, they both do. I think you just, like we were saying at the beginning of the show, both of these kind of speak a little bit of a different language, and you got to learn the language of the launcher. The good thing is they both have free trials, and I think ultimately what you do is you download them both and
try them.
Just spend. Yeah, I mean, one of them, they're so different that one will work and one will not for you.
And I actually found while you were talking, it's maybe new in Alfred version 4, which has just been out a few weeks. There actually is a setting now to put bookmarks in the default results.
Oh, nice.
So you don't have to do a keyword. So that may be new, or maybe that mine's been behind a keyword for years and I just have never looked. I don't mind the keywording system in Alfred. So basically what this is, I hit Command space, I get the Alfred window, and you give it a letter or two to tell it what you're doing. So BB is my bookmarks. I have the same thing for clipboard history, which we want to talk about, and mine is CB. So, and then that gives me my clipboard history. It kind of gives Alfred direction on where you want to go, because when your only interface is a text box, you either have to be really smart about what the user is doing, or you have to have flags that the user can set to do certain things. And Alfred kind of does both and LaunchBar does both, but I think more sort of on the smart side of it. And you just kind of have to get used to the way that it works. But for me, Command Space BB is so fast, and I chose BB because it's right above the space bar, so I don't have to move my thumb very far. It's fast enough where I don't mind the extra keystrokes, but you kind of got to live with it for a while, and it gets burned into your muscle memory.
Well, like when we talk later about workflows, I made an Alfred workflow that kind of duplicated other features, but it limited the results to just one thing I wanted.
Ooh,
and I
nice.
think that's what you've done with this BB. It's like you are only searching bookmarks. So the problem with LaunchBar searching bookmarks with everything else is you see your bookmarks, but you see other stuff too, document titles and other things get mixed in there. I think there's an advantage. And if it only requires typing 2 additional keys to say, I just want to search through my bookmarks, it gets you tighter, better results. So I think that's a good thing, really, in the end.
Yeah, it definitely works. It definitely works for me, and it's all customizable, so it doesn't have to be BB. It doesn't have to be 2 letters. I just set that because it was quick, and I wasn't going to do it accidentally. You know, it's kind of like text expander triggers. Mine, I'll start with a semicolon because I'm not going to type that and then a word for any other reason. In addition to just looking at your bookmarks, Alfred has a wide range of web searches. So you can search Google, you can search Gmail or Google Drive. It'll look to your logged in account for that. Twitter, Wikipedia, Amazon, eBay, LinkedIn, YouTube. It goes on and on. So you can use Alfred to search those sites directly from your keyboard wherever you are. So that's pretty cool. You can turn them off, you can turn them on, you can customize them. But it's great to be able to search the whole web from your Mac keyboard anywhere.
Well, another area that these apps do, and I think this is one of these apps do way better than Spotlight, is file management. And this is the idea of being able to not only find files, which Spotlight can do, but to work and do things to files. And the way I'll start with LaunchBar. So you can file navigate. So you type the name of any file and it'll find it for you. But you can also really navigate your drive. The tilde key, you know, that thing that's to the left of your one with the shift, the little curly dash, I guess. If you type that in LaunchBar, and this also works in Alfred, it gets you your home directory. So it just gets you the root of your drive or actually your home. So like your user account stuff. And then you can right arrow through it, and you can start kind of working through those directories. It's just like having a finder in a one-line text box, in essence. And then once you start finding certain common folders, just like Stephen was talking about with Alfred, it remembers that, oh, he opens that folder a lot. So if he types anything related to that name, I'm probably going to put that one at the top, you know. And then once you find a file, you can do file management on it. And if you hit the spacebar, you get quick look. If you hit control right arrow, you get work done. If you hit the tab key, you can like move it and copy it. They also, because LaunchBar is very kind of like inside knowledge app in the sense, like I think it's Command Shift R. You can rename a file from the LaunchBar window. You can actually rename it. It's like I know all these things. My fingers know them, but if I had to say what they are, I'd have to put my hands on the keyboard to tell you what I do. But it's very powerful. So you can move like moving stuff around your drive. It's way faster and more accurate than dragging things between different Finder windows. So I find file management very useful on these. Do you do that much on Alfred?
Alfred, as far as my usage, it's not really something I'm doing very often. It has the deal where you can start it with the tilde and move into your user folder, and you can navigate around. You can also, if you're searching for a file, you can navigate the folder it's in and then back out and kind of see where it is. But as far as actual like file management, that's really not something that that Alfred seems to be like toe to toe with LaunchBar. And I think LaunchBar is out ahead of what it can do and what you can do, like not only in Finder but within LaunchBar itself. Like Alfred basically ignores a lot of those sort of features.
Although there is, but I'll defend Alfred a little bit here, because if you have a file selected and you right arrow it, you can copy, move. You can do a lot of basic file management stuff, and it's not a bad interface. It works fine. One area that I think Alfred is behind, I could not find. I asked Steven about this. I meant to ask Mike Schmitz. I know Mike did a course on Alfred for Screencasts Online. LaunchBar has this cool feature where if you have files selected, and I always use it for files on my desktop, but you could also use it for files out of Finder. And if you hold the triggering key for LaunchBar, like in my case, it'd be Control Space, but long press the space key, it will take whatever files you currently have selected and select them in LaunchBar.
Oh, nice.
And immediately set you up for, you can then move, copy, whatever. So like when I've got a bunch of garbage on my desktop that I need to move into files, quite often it's like client stuff. Like when I'm working on a client thing, a lot of time I'll keep the files on the desktop. At the end of the day, the project's done. Then I'll just select the files, control long space, and then move them to the client folder on, the client storage. And it just takes a few keystrokes. It's much faster and more accurate than trying to drag and get Finder open. And I never was able to find a way to do that with Alfred.
Yeah, Alfred wants to. I mean, those features, it wants to dump you out to Finder. So like you can select a file and you can email it to somebody, or you can copy or move it. But it does want to do a lot of that in Finder and not within the interface itself. One thing that is sort of cool in this, once you're in this menu in Alfred, which you search for a file and you hit the right arrow, it does have an option there called Find Similar, and it will basically put that search, but put it out into a Finder window, and from there you could add tokens to it. It kind of gives you a launching point for a search within Finder itself. But I don't do a lot of file management in Alfred. I mean, the one I may use the most is take this file and attach it to an email. But even then, it's not super often, because just the types of work I normally do, if I'm emailing files, I'm emailing several, and I'm probably archiving them into a zip or something like that. Yeah. And it's a little too simple for what I need most of the time. It is here, but I think LaunchBar is probably more powerful and more flexible.
Yeah, the workaround I did during my enforced Alfred usage was I would just go to desktop and then select the files and then act on them. But it was just a couple extra steps. I mean, it's these differences are very nuanced, honestly. But I feel like LaunchBar may have a little bit of an edge when it comes to file management. But you can do a lot of it with both of these apps.
Let's talk about, real quickly, because I want to talk about workflows, and that's a big part of this. But I do want to talk about something that is unique to Alfred, and that is Alfred Remote.
Yeah.
It is an iPhone app that interfaces with Alfred on the Mac across the local network. So it kind of turns your iPhone into a remote control via Alfred. I should say, though, that this app is not full screen on the iPhone 10 or anything bigger. It hasn't been updated in quite a while. And I am a little dubious on its actual use. So the app is divided into a couple things. It has system commands. So from Alfred, you can say, you can start typing screensaver and it will launch a screensaver. You can type sleep and the computer will go to sleep, etc. It surfaces all of that. So if you are using, a Mac Mini as a home server, for instance, and you want to do those sorts of things without having to remote into it from something like Screens, then that's pretty quick. But you can also start searches and do other things on the Mac, but the iPhone doesn't get an interface to it. So I'm not sure and maybe I'm just not thinking of a good use case, but in my experience, that's not a useful thing to me. If it was surfacing that on my phone and then letting me do actions from the phone, that would be one thing, but it basically just remote controls Alfred on the screen of your Mac. It's just I don't have the app installed. I installed it for this episode, but it's not something that I rely on any sort of regular basis. And it hasn't been updated in a long time, and it seems like it's kind of an afterthought at this point.
Yeah, in fact, when I went all in with Alfred this past week and a half, I looked at the app. I'm like, I can't think of a single reason why I would want it. So I didn't even install it. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's out there, but it's not something that I think is particularly useful.
You want to talk about clipboard management?
Yeah.
Because these apps both replace the clipboard in interesting ways.
Yeah. So how do you use it, and how does it work in LaunchBar?
I have to be honest, I don't use it.
Fair.
It's got a cool clipboard thing. So you can save clipboard entries, like you can say the last 30 or save the ones over the last week. And it shows you the app sources where the clipboard entries came from, which makes it easy. But I think Keyboard Maestro's clipboard is so much superior, because with Keyboard Maestro, you can select on an as needed basis, whether it's plain text or rich text. I mean, you can do more with the Keyboard Maestro clipboard manager. So long time ago, I realized, no, for clipboard stuff, I'm going to just use Keyboard Maestro. But they do have one, and it's cool. And I used to use it until I found the light with Keyboard Maestro, but it's been years since I used it.
Hey, that's fair enough. I do use clipboard history. I do use it in Alfred. Again, it's behind a keyword of CB for clipboard, and you hit enter, and then it gives you in the UI. Basically, I have mine set to the last 20 things, and I have mine set to be accessible via plain text, images, and file list. So you could say, don't include images in the clipboard history. And basically you select the one you want and you hit enter, and then that is on your clipboard replacing what's there now. So it's not a multi-clipboard deal. It's not having a clipboard for this and a clipboard for that. It's a single clipboard and rotates things in and out. I use this all the time. Very often I'm compiling show notes. I have links or text from various places, and I can copy them all and then go back into the clipboard history and paste them. And Alfred has a thing that is really nice. It's a checkbox that says ignore data from other Apple devices. So if you have iCloud signed in, it has the universal clipboard. So if you copy something on your phone and paste it on your Mac, you can turn that on or off based on your preference with Alfred. And so if I copy something on my iPhone and it ends up on the clipboard of my Mac, then this gets added to the history, and you can disable that if you want. And you can also clear your clipboard history. So say that you pasted someone's, social security number or credit card number, and you want to clear that, you can use the clear keyword, and it gives you options to clear the clipboard history from the last 5 minutes or the last 15 minutes, and kind of go about scrubbing your clipboard history that way. So it is something that I use all the time, and I do use it through Alfred.
Yeah, they have a cool feature on the clipboard for LaunchBar. I think they have it on Alfred too, or you can get a workflow for it that's called clip merge. Whereas you clip things, it combines them. So if you're taking a bunch of pieces of text and you want them to spit out as one piece of text, you can do that. I have not found much use for that. A couple times I accidentally triggered it, and then that was hilarious, right? Because then I'd paste and get a bunch more than I expected.
Right.
But I think there's some people for which that's a cool feature, but it's just not for me.
And there are even whole menu bar apps on the Mac that are just clipboard history, and it's not baked into something bigger. So there are a lot of ways to do this, and you can find the way that works for you. But I know for me, clipboard history has become just ingrained in the way that I work. And I really rely on it several times a week, if not several times a day, when I'm publishing things, to load up a bunch of stuff in the clipboard and then go back and fetch it in another application real quickly is a real lifesaver for me.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a game changer. If you don't have some sort of clipboard history system, and you find yourself going to one document, copy, then go to a different document, paste, then go back to a different document, copy. I mean, rather than just collect all that stuff at once and then go put it in with a clipboard history app, it really improves your speed and just sanity, frankly. We're going to take a quick break to talk about Hover, one of the show's longest running sponsors. We know you love learning about tech, and Hover is a great tech company to talk about. It's a big leap for a ton of entrepreneurs because your business starts with a domain name. Hover has over 300 domain name extensions to choose from. No matter what you want to build, there's a domain name waiting for it. And they have excellent technical support to answer any question you may have. And they are dedicated to getting you online and not upselling you. It's like a domain company with a conscience. Hover has a free Whois privacy, so bad guys can't get your information, has a clean UX, it's monthly sales on popular top-level domains, and it's easy to see why Hover is the popular choice for people starting a business. One of the first things I did when I decided to go out on my own as a lawyer was I bought my domain. I was so happy. I went on Hover. I bought it. It made me feel really good. It's like, now this is real. And Hover made it really easy for me to walk through the steps. I still have my domain hosted through Hover. Another thing I did with Hover was when my kids were born, I bought their names as domains through Hover. So to this day, I've been carrying them every year. I'm really looking forward to them getting old enough, Stephen, so they can start paying for their domains. But I haven't got there quite yet. But it's cool. At some point, they're going to want to have their domain, I think. And I took care of it for them when they were little kids. So you can buy your domain today and start using it. Just go to hover.com/MPU and get a 10% discount on all new purchases. That URL, one more time, is hover.com/MPU. Make a name for yourself with Hover. Our thanks to Hover for their support of this show and all of Relay FM.
All right, so we're going to talk about the workflow engine within both of these applications. And before we do that, with Alfred at least, there is some gray area between a workflow and a custom search. And so for instance, a lot of my workflow, and I'm going to have some examples in the show notes of some that I've built, are effectively just custom searches. But Alfred does give you the option to create a custom search. You give it a search URL, and you have to give it a title and that sort of thing. It's easier, I think, to do this than build an entire workflow just for a custom search. But again, I'll have examples for both. So for instance, my custom search to search the K-base. So if I want to search articles for, I don't know, the Power Mac 7600, I can type command space, I type KB for K-base, and then I can type out my my search, whatever I said, the Power Mac 7600. I could do that as a workflow, but I've made this one a custom search. So with Alfred, at least, there is back and forth on which one is better or easier depending on what you want to do. Workflows are far more customizable, but you can use them basically as just a way to search something custom on the web. But I kind of wanted to clear that up because I think it's a little confusing in Alfred settings, like when you should use web search over an action or over a workflow. But that is kind of what it is, the way Alfred's laid out.
Yeah, like Alfred was the first to this game. I mean, what we have is kind of a running battle between Alfred and LaunchBar, and each one comes out with a new feature or a new way to do it, and then the next one gets leapfrogged with the next update. And I love this because they're pushing each other to make the apps better. But Alfred, I think, in general, did a better job with this integration. They call them workflows. LaunchBar. There's too many automation apps, Stephen. LaunchBar calls them actions. And with Alfred, they're very visual. Like when you install them, there's like a kind of like a flow chart thing that shows you exactly what's going. You see the commands you can go in and you can edit them, and the edit engine is very powerful. So much so that once I started using the workflows with Alfred, I immediately saw, oh yeah, this is a lot easier to use. And there was a sample one to search your home folder, right? And I thought, well, that would be good, but it only finds folders on your home folder. So that'd be cool. Like I talked about earlier, the idea of limiting a search to a certain type of object so you get better results. Well, I am often in my clients folder on my legal thing, right? So I just duplicated the Alfred workflow to search your home folder, and I pointed it at the client folder in my legal stuff. So now I just type SL space for Sparks Law, and then I can type a client name, and it gives me just the folders for that client. And it's a super fast way to get to those folders. And I made it it took me 5 minutes to figure it out. And that includes adding a custom icon. It's not hard. Whereas, the actions with LaunchBar, generally, I've been downloading them, but I haven't been creating them like I have with Alfred.
Yeah, and that's part of this too, is there is a community of people building workflows for these applications. And you can go in, you can find things. There's forums you can look at. Again, I've published a couple, so I have a few for downloading, one for searching Giphy, which is a GIF repository online, and one for searching the Internet Archive. And that's actually two. You can search by URL or by content. And you can just share those and put them up on a server and have them for download like I have for the show notes. So it is neat to see that if you have a certain thing you want to do, someone in the community may have already built it and you can import it and then tinker with it through that interface that you described.
Yeah, one of the things LaunchBar does is it includes a lot of the things that have been created as workflow actions LaunchBar has had for a long time. Like if you select an image file with LaunchBar and you just type resize, it has built-in features to resize images. Like I can say resize 50, resize 33, and it'll resize the image right from LaunchBar. It's like, in a lot of ways, LaunchBar has pre-installed many of the things that people are creating custom workflows for Alfred.
Mm-hmm.
But there is something to be said. I don't know. I'm on both sides of the fence on this because when you create custom ones, you can make them custom. You can make them fit you like I did with that folder search. But I also found some of the Alfred stuff I've been downloading just doesn't work. It's like changes in the application. One of them, I didn't have the necessary Python library installed. It's like, suddenly when you start installing things from third parties, it's just a little more hectic in terms of does it actually work or not.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And there's definitely some experimentation. Again, we might be in just a weird spot right now because it was just updated.
Yeah.
But it's something too that even if something doesn't work, kind of like with Keyboard Maestro, like with your examples in your field guide, you can see how it's built and then kind of figure it out, like how to adapt it on your own. And that might not work if it relies on some sort of system integration that doesn't work in your version of macOS. But if it's a web search, you can kind of figure it out. So for instance, the ones that I've built, I found an example and then I sort of plugged in my own URLs that I wanted and figured out how to make it work. And so it's a nice way to learn sort of simple, it's not, I mean, it is programming to a degree, but simple workflow creation to build something that that's custom to what you need and not something that someone on the internet wanted for themselves.
Yeah, I keep talking about Keyboard Maestro because it does kind of come into play with these discussions. Both of them have actions or workflows. The Alfred one is from a third party, and I'll put a link in the show notes. But you can download integrations with Keyboard Maestro where you just type KM and then you can type the name of your script and it runs, which is awesome. I don't know. I really like this is a new turn for both of these apps. The idea of adding additional power through third parties, and I really like it. And honestly, like I said, I think Alfred kind of pulls ahead in this regard because of the user, how much easier it is for a user to customize.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really, as silly as it sounds, a problem I had was I want to just search my client folders, and with LaunchBar, traditionally I would type a client name, and if I had been in the folder before, it would always surface it because that's usually where I go. But with Keyboard Maestro, with Alfred. Jeez. I'm sorry. Anyway, with Alfred, by creating that custom search, it requires me to type an additional 2 letters, blah, blah, but it gets me so much closer to my endpoint that that's really a benefit.
And the way they're built in Alfred is not dissimilar from Keyboard Maestro or other automation tools. You have triggers like hotkeys or snippets. You have an input, you have actions, and then you have utilities and outputs. And so we're talking really in the context of search, but you can have workflows that reach out to the web if you have something that has an API, because you can execute scripts within this. I've got one when I was using Remember the Milk. I know that
I didn't say anything.
I know that Remember the Milk has an API that uses Ruby, and so I have a disabled workflow in my Alfred library that let me basically input something to Remember the Milk via their API via a Ruby script. And so if you want to go deeper, just like you can in Text Expander or Keyboard Maestro or any of these other tools, and dip into a scripting language, you want to run a bash script, you want to use Ruby, Python, or Perl, or AppleScript, it gives you the power to execute those things from your keyboard. So in a way, in this arena, Alfred LaunchBar, Keyboard Maestro, Automator, Apple Script Editor, like they are all playing in the same playground. The way I view it is I'm using Alfred for these other things. And so these workflows, I could execute these with in a bunch of different ways. I choose to do them in Alfred because that's where I'm already spending a lot of my time on my Mac. So it's an extension of the searching functionality, not necessarily because Alfred does it better or worse than other options, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but I feel like I've been discovering more from Alfred workflows than I ever did from LaunchBar Actions. Like I installed one yesterday. It's a time zone one. I just got it off the Alfred. If you go to the Alfred website, they have some recommended workflows right on their page. And there's a time zone one. And you just type TZ and it gives me time zones. And I was able, it's very easy. It's got kind of a language to it, but I was able to add Vienna because I podcast with Rose in Vienna. And I've got, Tennessee in there. And I've got, the people that I work with. So I just type TZ and it gives me the time currently in all those locations.
That's cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like, I feel like it's just Alfred does a better job of this, in my opinion. And I know the actions are newer with LaunchBar than the workflows are with Alfred. So who knows where they're going to be in 6 months. But I really like the fact that both of these are making themselves, adding this kind of plug-in architecture to these already powerful applications. Why don't you share a few of your favorite workflows?
Yeah, so I named two where I have my a search for Giphy and a search for the K-base. I use one. It's a third-party one by a guy named Sean who wrote one to search the Notes app. So like I said, Spotlight has the ability to do this, but Alfred didn't. And so I installed this one, and it basically goes around and searches content from my Notes app, which is what I use as my to-do list for some things, and all sorts of stuff is in Notes, right? It's like one day we will have a Notes showdown again. But until then, I use Apple Notes for everything, and it lets me search that really easily. I know there are people out there saying, well, like, you are installing things from third-party people you don't know. That's true. That is part of this. But I think, especially with the Alfred forums and community, there are a lot of people in here who are working on these together. And I think there are people who would call out something that they felt was inappropriate or was doing something they didn't want. So you're kind of trusting the community. But for a lot of things that are just search, it's not going to have the ability to really do a lot of damage, I don't think. And you can open the workflow and see what it's doing.
Yeah, that's the big point, is you can actually take it apart in human understandable forms to see exactly what's happening.
Right. So I like that they're not just closed boxes. Those are the ones that I use the most. I've got one for turning letters into letters with circles around them. For some reason, our friend Jamie Phelps made me that years ago, and that's in there. I don't think I've used it in a long time, but you can do funny text replacement stuff as well. So I don't have many, but the ones that I use all the time. Like that note search I use, I don't know how many times a day. Because it's just faster to do it that way than to go to Notes and scroll through 400 notes and find the one that I want.
And also just the idea that, once again, it's limiting the search to just notes.
Mm-hmm.
So Stephen, I feel like we're getting a different side of you between your Giphy search and all this stuff. And I've always noticed, like, on some of like the Slack we're on, you are one of the most frequent contributors of Giphy like pictures. I think you just did it to me like the other day. Is this your trick? Is it all through this Alfred search?
Well, so Slack has its own GIF integration, so you can search Giphy within Slack. So I do that. But if I need to drop a GIF on somebody, in an iMessage thread or something, it basically just searches the Giphy website and then pulls up the results in a web browser. So a little bit faster than going to Giphy, finding the search box, typing into it. I can just do it all from my launcher. But sometimes GIFs are just the best way to communicate with somebody. And it's a fast way to get that done.
Yeah, well, you definitely are Giphy. You have a talent for it, man. That's all I'm going to say.
Sure. That's what I'll be
It's
remembered for.
one of your superpowers. It just never occurs to me, like I want to like use them with my kids to be cool, but every time I try, I pick the wrong one and I'm not cool. I don't know.
You gotta. There's a knack to it. I will say that.
I'm Giphy challenged.
That's fine. We'll work on that together. So I think what we're coming up with is that the workflow action stuff seems to be more well-rounded in Alfred than in LaunchBar, both in terms of UI and how they work, but also in terms of the community around them building things to extend it. Honestly, I'll tell the truth here. When I was in my week and a half of LaunchBar testing as an Alfred user, I didn't come across its actions directory for the first several days. I was like, it can't do workflow stuff. And then I did some Googling and realized that, it can.
Yeah.
Alfred, I think, does a better job at if you're in Alfred settings, showing all of that stuff, giving you actions and workflows and all of the things it can do, snippets, which we haven't really touched on yet.
Yeah.
It makes all that much more easily discoverable than LaunchBar does. LaunchBar, I feel like some of that stuff sort of hidden away.
Yeah, if you're using one of these or going to try one of these as a result of this episode, one of the tricks is you activate the app, command or control space, whatever your trigger is, and then command comma to open the preferences. Because these apps are just a text box, sometimes it's hard to figure out how to get to the preferences. But command comma gets you in, and take a good look at the preferences for both of them, because there's a ton of customization in there. Like one of the things I do is they both have a search index. What are they searching? I go in and tweak that so it just searches the places I want to. I add a few, take a few away, and you want to get in there and kind of make it work for you better. Mm-hmm. And that's where you turn on things like search documents and folders as well as apps, and things like that.
Yeah, it's all stashed away in there. So definitely take some time exploring what's in those settings, what's in these forms and stuff online, because these apps are really, in a way, palettes to become whatever you need them to be. I think if you sat down 5 Alfred users or 5 LaunchBar users, the way they had it set up, the way they would be using it would be different. And part of that is these apps learn over time what you want, but part of it is this extensibility angle where you can bolt on things to their core functionality as you need them. And that makes them really sticky. I like Alfred this episode. It was very interesting, and I'm glad that I explored LaunchBar because I haven't looked at it in years, but I'm not going to change because Alfred is so ingrained into the way that I work.
Yeah. No, I get it. And like at one point you had texted me and I knew exactly what was making you crazy. It was that delay. Because if you start typing and you stop to think about it and the trigger hits, then you continue typing. You're not continuing typing. It's starting over again. Mm-hmm. And I know that there's something for a lot of people that it's an immediate turn off. Once you figure it out, it's okay, but it is a different way. It's that input that is a huge difference between the two.
Yeah, you wouldn't think that 2 apps that are just text boxes could be so different, but they can be. I want to round out talking about a couple features we haven't touched on yet. One is snippets. There are text expander-like features in Alfred, and again, it is tied to like the third-party deal, so you can load in snippet libraries. I don't really use this because Text Expander has been part of my Mac setup way longer than Alfred has, but it is here. So if you are looking to have an app that does sort of lots of things for you, Alfred can take over those responsibilities. And like I said, there are third-party libraries you can install and have, custom snippets of, things I've seen, like an emoji replacement deal. So you can type a name of emoji and it will put the emoji on your pasteboard. Mac symbol. So if you find yourself typing the command, like keyboard shortcuts, like if you're a field guide creator, for instance, you can do all that on the keyboard, but it's like a bunch of crazy shortcuts. And so you could have just a few of those ready to go in snippets with Alfred from a third-party library. So you have some options there that, if you need those sort of things, can make it a little bit easier to find.
When you said emoji, it reminded me, one of the commands I use in LaunchBar all the time, if I need to find an emoji, You could always use the, what is it, control command spacebar opens kind of the Apple thing, but it's kind of awkward. But in LaunchBar, you just type emoji and then you hit the spacebar and it gives you all of the emoji and you can search from there. You can type, football and it'll find a football for you. And then Command C and paste. It's very fast. I just tried that over in Alfred. It doesn't seem to have that same command, but maybe it's just there and I haven't unearthed it. But yeah, it's just like, it's funny. One thing in LaunchBar has, I think, is a lot of built-in stuff that people don't realize is there.
Yeah, you got to dig through it. You got to dig through all the settings, all the screens, and find what you want. Another feature that Alfred has that I rely on because I'm a 2 Mac user is that you can have Alfred sync all of its settings to a Dropbox file. And so Alfred on both of my computers is the same. So if I change a setting one place, it's changed somewhere else. If I add a workflow one place, it's added to the other computer. And if you're a multi-Mac user, that's a huge deal because you don't want to have to rebuild all your automation stuff every time you tweak it.
Yeah.
And that is really cool.
Yeah, I haven't even looked into that with LaunchBar, so I don't know. In terms of price, they're about the same. LaunchBar is $29 for a single license, $49 for a family. And Alfred is £23 for a single license, and $39 gets you a lifetime upgrade for future versions. I had bought Alfred years ago. Once I started my experiment, I went ahead and bought an upgrade license to the Power Pack, which is what you need for most of the stuff we were talking about here, or a lot of the stuff we were talking about. I don't know. I think it's cheap for the amount of time these apps can save you.
Yeah. There's a usage graph in Alfred, and since March 2013, I have used Alfred 81,000 times.
Wow.
An average of, 40 something times a day.
Yeah.
So,
well, there you go.
And it tells you what it is. So most of mine is like general usage. I have some clipboard stuff, navigation, iTunes control. So it gives you a breakdown of how you use it. And it is money well spent for me. Anytime there's an update, it's an automatic purchase.
So what you're saying is you got your money's worth with your 23 pounds.
Yes, most definitely. In fact, I didn't do the lifetime. I choose to upgrade every time because I'm so dependent on this. I want it to be around for a really long time.
Yeah. You were saying you can't wait to get back to Alfred. I get it. I have enjoyed my experiment with Alfred, and the workflow stuff has me intrigued. Even though I'm used to the way the text input on Alfred versus LaunchBar, I think Alfred might be the right answer, honestly. But there's some stuff I do in LaunchBar that is so ingrained in me. My go forward is I'm going to leave the 3 launchers on my device. I'm going to have all 3. So, I mean, why not? I paid for them. I'm going to use them.
You could have one on each screen,
Yeah, I guess I could. But I'm going to actually try to put more effort into Alfred and go deeper with it and see, how I can do with like some of the file management stuff. I'm just curious to see like some of the obscure stuff I do with LaunchBar. Can I replace that in Alfred? And so my experiment is going to continue. I like them both. I feel like I'm kind of bilingual at this point. But I definitely am faster in LaunchBar. But I just, for the fun of it, I want to spend some more time with Alfred. So I'm not running away from it like you are, LaunchBar.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, LaunchBar, but I'm back in Alfred's warm embrace.
No, that's fine. I think what we'll find in the forums is there are people who are super passionate about both apps because they're both really good.
They're both. This is an embarrassment of riches for Mac users, and I also learned in this that Spotlight is a lot more powerful than I realized, and it also makes me sad for iOS Spotlight. I wish it was faster. I wish it was extensible.
Yes.
Maybe one day we'll get there.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that like the stuff we do with these launchers, and when you have a keyboard attached to an iPad and you hit Command Space, just a little part of you dies inside because you are not getting what you get on your Mac.
Maybe one day, you could see a future where Spotlight and shortcuts become better integrated, and you could fire actions from there and do all these things. They have some pieces there. They need to put them together, but this is another example where the Mac, in terms of automation, is just a lot more flexible than the iPad and the iPhone, even though Shortcuts has gotten really good, as being neck deep in it right now. but
Yeah.
there are just some things the Mac just continues to shine in, and I feel like this realm of launching the Mac is just ahead.
I was at the ABA Tech Show earlier this year, and I was working in the speaker room there's 2 speakers for every session, and my co-speaker was sitting next to me, and we had to make some changes to some things. And I was just flying through LaunchBar, moving files, changing things, renaming, blah, blah, blah. It was just all happening. And this co-speaker was sitting next to me looking at my screen, and he said, "What are you doing?" He was just amazed, because you really can fly with one of these apps once you kind of get it under your fingers, and you'll be surprised at, like, then someone says, "Get your mouse and drag something," or it's just like, it's like dragging you back into the Stone Age.
Yep. You got to use your cursor for stuff. It's like in Back to the Future. Like, you have to use your hands. That's a baby's toy.
Yeah.
Keyboard. I want to stay on the keyboard as much as I can when I'm on my Mac, when I'm in the zone. And Alfred lets me do that.
Did you ever see that? What was it, Star Trek, when they went back to, San Francisco, and Scotty holds up the mouse and starts talking into it?
Exactly.
That's what it feels like. All right. Well, anyway, launchers, if you're using them, hopefully you learned a few things today to help you get better at it. If not, download one. These are both apps you can do free trials on. I would recommend kicking the tires on both of them, picking the one that works for you. There's some great stuff in here, and you can get faster on your Mac. Hopefully get your work done and get home earlier every day with something like this. Thank you to our sponsors, SaneBox, Smile, and Hover. We are the Mac Power Users. You can find us over at relay.fm/MPU. Don't forget to sign up for that newsletter if you're interested, and we'll see you next week.